Mercedes has failed one of the toughest tests for any F1 car, and that's a big red flag when it comes to its hopes of taking the fight to Red Bull in 2024, one that shows just how far it still has to go. In terms of outright pace, the Japanese Grand Prix weekend was the worst of the season for Mercedes, with its best lap 1.160% off the quickest overall. That proves that while Mercedes is second in the Constructors' Championship, there are big question marks about whether it really can make the gains needed to re-emerge as a regular winner next year. That it has just under half the points total of Red Bull is revealing, and the reasons were largely demonstrated by what happened at Suzuka. So why did Mercedes struggle so badly just a week after it was in contention to win the race in Singapore? Suzuka is a demanding circuit with a wide range of corner speed profiles and plenty of long, quick corners. Even once the setup was optimised, Hamilton described the car as having as good a balance as possible, but lacking in rear grip. The first sector was the major weak point. This is as tough a test of car and driver as any sector on the calendar, with the snake section requiring a well-balanced and responsive car that allows the driver to be very precise and carry the speed. Mercedes could not do that. As Hamilton pointed out, Mercedes simply can't carry anywhere near the speeds Red Bull can in Sector 1, and it lagged well behind McLaren too, setting only the 5th best time, albeit while being much of a muchness in terms of pace compared to Aston Martin and Ferrari. As Mercedes trackside performance director Andrew Shovlin explained, the weaknesses Suzuka exposed fundamentally just come down to the corner speed range. Singapore's short duration, slow 90-degree corners suited a car that has made good gains in 2023 in that area. In the faster corners, the Mercedes is weaker, whereas Shovlin described the Red Bull and the McLaren as super strong round such quick corners. He described them as having more downforce in their cars in a certain ride height range. That certain ride height range would be relatively low given the higher the speed, the more powerful the ground effect created by the underfloor. The Mercedes is better at higher ride heights and therefore in slower corners. The question is, why? It would be unfair to say Mercedes has been baffled by the ground effect regulations introduced at the start of 2022. However, there's overwhelming evidence proving it has not fully mastered the nuances required to get the most out of such cars. Mercedes dominated the era before these new regulations, but our very own ex-F1 technical director Gary Anderson is not convinced the team really has the level of understanding needed to produce a car quick enough to fight for the title. The car has a number of weaknesses relative to Red Bull, one of the most obvious of which is it's too draggy, but the troubles in the faster corners point to a real problem that's fundamental to getting these cars to work. There's several factors at play here. The overall downforce of the car is one of those. That is in itself critical, but it's not as simple as that. The Mercedes has long suffered from rear-end instability, and that was a problem at Suzuka. The simple answer is create more rear downforce, but it's far more complicated than that. One of the key challenges with these cars is producing good downforce and a good balance across a wide range of ride heights. One of the ways to do that is to ensure that your aerodynamic centre of pressure, so the point that represents the aggregate of all that downforce, shifts rearward at higher speeds. That's because ideally you want it further forward for slower corners to give you the front end, and then a rear end that ideally rotates well and in a controllable way. That control of the aero centre of pressure is dictated by myriad factors, and it's worth noting that mastery of flexible bodywork is one of those. The Mercedes floor concept will play a part in that as well. There's also the problem that achieving a good through-corner aerodynamic balance, which is crucial for long corners, is more difficult under these regulations. Previously, those gloriously elaborate bargeboard areas were all about doing this, but the simplified top-body aero means you can't resort to that. In short, Suzuka, particularly the ultra-demanding first sector, showed that Mercedes still has a lot of learning to do if it's to perform well at this kind of track. While Mercedes can chip away at the problem for the rest of the year, any hope of fixing this weakness lies with next year's car. Mercedes has made big changes this year, notably with its Monaco Grand Prix upgrade package that did improve the car. That rear-end instability in the higher speed was improved by it, and it has given Mercedes a little more control over the mechanical platform thanks to the increased anti-dive in the front suspension. That package, of course, eliminated the infamous zero sidepod approach that Mercedes introduced at the start of last year, and that Adrian Newey describes as the almost polar opposite to Red Bull's approach. However, Mercedes is effectively trying to make the most of a limited car. As Shovlin explained when the Monaco upgrade was introduced, the limitations of adapting an existing car to a different concept will be there until 2024. Because of that, he said, the team has not ended up with exactly what it would want. The changes yielded a step in performance, one that's been built on with subsequent developments, but it's not transformed the car. That's because there are fundamental limitations in terms of the monocoque and suspension geometry that are locked in primarily thanks to the limitations imposed by the cost cap. As Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff said earlier this season, in a money no object world, Mercedes would have designed a brand new monocoque. That would potentially have fixed the problem with the cockpit position being too far forward, but requires work to tweak the shape of the chassis and the positioning of the side impact structures. Such changes could also open up room to increase the potential of the underfloor Venturi tunnels, given Red Bull has had some success with its more V-shaped monocoque that creates a little extra space for the tunnels. All of this is being worked on for 2024 by Mercedes, meaning that it won't be until the early stages of next season that we will know if the lessons have been learned. That Suzuka is the fourth race of the season next year will be a real test of how much progress Mercedes has made. Lewis Hamilton has been vocal in demanding Mercedes make changes. After the Japanese Grand Prix, he said that the next 6 months has to be the greatest 6 months of development that we've ever had. The reality is that this process has already started, with the key architectural aspects of the car already pretty much set. These are the things that Mercedes has to get right. Understandably, Hamilton is a little frustrated given he feels some of the feedback he's given over the past 18 months hasn't been taken heed of quickly enough. The advanced cockpit position, which he says transforms the feel of the car and the rear end particularly, is just one example of that. At Suzuka, he said that the problem is clear and that it's down to Mercedes to make the required changes. Hamilton cited McLaren's remarkable progress this year, transforming from also-ran to the second highest point scorer in the last 7 races, as proof of what can be done. McLaren introduced a change of floor concept in Azerbaijan, but it wasn't until the 9th race in Austria that it deployed a major upgrade package that made it significantly more competitive. It has subsequently built on that, most recently with another upgrade introduced in Singapore, culminating in finishing 2nd and 3rd and comprehensively outperforming Mercedes at Suzuka. McLaren has taken a clear step in Red Bull's direction. Hamilton wants Mercedes to do the same, effectively therefore also following McLaren's lead with its sidepod approach. As he said, the evidence is there at McLaren. That is the direction. He also backed Mercedes to be able to do this. He pointed out that the team is able to put downforce on the car, but at the risk of causing more porpoising. Understanding how to change direction and produce performance without the problems of bouncing and porpoising will therefore be key. And the die is being cast right now for Mercedes. As Hamilton says, the decisions that are made in this period of time are critical for our trajectory. Mercedes knows the direction it wants to go in, and the hope is that it should yield a car that is aerodynamically and mechanically able to produce consistent performance across a wide range of ride heights and corner profiles. Provided, that is, it really understands the fine detail required to make the concept work. And that's something that its Suzuka performance suggests might still elude Mercedes.